Dunkirk is the latest, and to some people, greatest movie by Christopher Nolan, which is about the Dunkirk evacuation in 1940 during World War II. Basically, what happened back in 1940 was 400,000 Allied troops were stuck in the harbor of Dunkirk in northern France, and they were surrounded by the Nazis. Enemies were on all sides, and if they tried to escape, then the Nazis would destroy their ships and kill them, so there was nowhere to run. But the miracle of Dunkirk happened when a bunch of civilian vessels came to Dunkirk to evacuate the soldiers, something that the enemy never counted on. It took place between May 26th and June 4th of 1940, before the Americans ever got into the war. And to a lot of people in the UK, Dunkirk is pretty much to them what the Alamo is to Texas. Just that one thing where it wasn't a big victory, but because it happened, it led to many greater victories in the war. And the plot of this movie is pretty much the whole evacuation. And that's about it. So this is a new Christopher Nolan movie coming out. A lot of people are very, very quick to call his movies one of the greatest films ever made. And to not put the guy down at all, he's made some amazing movies like Memento, Batman Begins, The Dark Knight, and Inception. But his last two movies, I didn't think were very good. I didn't like The Dark Knight Rises or Interstellar. I like Interstellar a little more than The Dark Knight Rises just for its ambition, because Dark Knight Rises was just, at its core, another Batman movie, and not very special. But Interstellar suffered from a very long runtime, too many shots of nothing happening, and a stupid ending. It was one of those things where, even if I liked the first half of the movie, or maybe like the first 2 hours, that ending killed it. And Dunkirk is great. I really like Dunkirk a lot. I think it might be his best movie since The Dark Knight. I do like Inception, but I think this is just a bit better than Inception. What I love about this movie is that it cuts the bullshit. It gets right into the meat of the evacuation, and it's told from interesting perspectives. It's told from 3 different perspectives. It's told from the soldier's perspective on the mole, which goes for about a week. It's told from the perspective of Mark Rylance on the sea with his yacht throughout one day. And it's told from the perspective of the Spitfire pilots, which takes place in 1 hour. So eventually these 3 elements do meet up near the end of the movie. So you do kind of have to really pay attention on what's going on as the movie progresses. It's kind of like when Nolan directed Memento. I'm not saying this is as complicated as Memento, but just in the way that this movie is told out of sequence, but by the time you get to the halfway point and towards the end, you'll go, ah, I see what you're doing. And because of that, this actually results in one of his shortest movies. Both Dark Knight Rises and Interstellar were 2 hours and 40 minutes, if not a little more. Dunkirk is an hour shorter than both of those movies. This is about an hour and 40 minutes. It does feel much longer than that, though, and I think that's actually the point, because the whole movie puts you in the perspective of this evacuation. Like, you're with these soldiers, you're with these pilots and civilians, and you just want it to end. Not in a bad way, like you want the movie to end, but you feel like you're in the shit. You want this horrible tragedy to end, and you want to get taken to safety. So it's a really clever way of telling the story of this evacuation. One problem that I hear a lot from people about this movie is that there's no character development. All the characters, even if they're played by noticeable actors, are just types, and you don't really get to know that much about them. For me, given the way that this story's told, it doesn't really bother me. Sure, I always like it when there are characters to care about, but the movie is very much focused on the event. Like, when you look at Godzilla Resurgence, there aren't really any characters to define in that movie except by name tags, but the whole movie is more of a focus on what if Godzilla were a real thing and how the Japanese government would handle it. So there's really no bullshitting around. And I should really make something like a swear jar, except a how many times I've mentioned Godzilla in a review jar, where I just put some coins in that jar. I wonder how much that would be filled up. But whatever. I'll do that for the next video. Anyway, back to Dunkirk. Yeah, there isn't much character development at all, but again, the movie is based around the event, and because it's only focused on the event, you don't really have the time to develop the characters. You have great performances from people like Kenneth Branagh, Mark Rylance, Cillian Murphy, Yay! I said it! I said it correctly! I said it! Not Cillian Murphy, Cillian Murphy. Whew, now you people can be quiet. Oh, and Tom Hardy's eyeballs. All of them give a really good performance, and especially with Tom Hardy, because just like in The Dark Knight Rises, his face is covered up most of the time, so he has to emote through his eyeballs. And it's still kind of sad that with Dark Knight Rises, Mad Max, and now this, he has to act through most of the movie with shit on his face. But I think the fact that he's managed to convey a lot with just his eyeballs just proves that he is a very talented actor. The score is phenomenal as well. Once again, it's Hans Zimmer, who pretty much does all of Christopher Nolan's movies, just like John Williams does all of, if not most of, Steven Spielberg's films. And with Hans Zimmer, I tend to find him a little bit of a cliche at this point, but whenever he teams up with Christopher Nolan, you always know that he's going to do something really special and make a really incredible and even unique score. And that's the case with Dunkirk here. The score is very unique, it's very tension-filled, and throughout a lot of the score you hear this ticking clock, and it just puts you on the edge of your seat because whenever you hear a ticking clock in a movie, you know that you automatically assume that a bomb is just gonna go off. And this thing plays out through most of the movie, so it just makes you feel so nervous. And once again, the cinematography is gorgeous. Christopher Nolan once again shot this film with IMAX cameras, and it's just absolutely amazing to watch. And I really love the fact that he really went out in terms of using practical effects. There are a few select moments in there where you can obviously tell that they used a CG thing, or if it's a green screen, but most of the time, everything you see is practical. The ships are practical, the planes themselves are practical, and they're attaching the cameras to these planes. It just makes you really want to watch the behind the scenes when the Blu-ray comes out, just so you can answer the question of, how did they do that? Even if you're not getting a whole lot of character development, this movie is a masterpiece in terms of its technical aspects. Just the fact that it utilized so many practical elements that you could have easily done with computers, but they went the extra mile to make it feel organic. If I had one criticism, and it's really something that's not going to bump the movie down, it just kind of bugged me, it's that this is a war movie, but it's a very bloodless war movie. This is PG-13, and you don't see an ounce of blood throughout this movie. With a war movie particularly, it just doesn't feel real when you see soldiers getting blown up or even shot and there's no blood. Now, I'm not wanting it to be a total gore fest like Saving Private Ryan or Hacksaw Ridge, especially, but just having even a little bit of blood or maybe a dismembered arm or leg there would have made the movie a little more realistic and grounded. But the movie does a good job of making the injuries and the violence implied, because sometimes the things that you imagine in your head are more powerful than the things that you actually see. So that's ultimately why this complaint isn't going to bump my rating down. I don't have much else to say or much to complain about with this movie. Dunkirk is truly a masterpiece, mainly in its technical aspects and the way it tells the event of Dunkirk. It's amazing to look at, it's intense, the score's great, the performances are really good. There is one section of the movie that really kind of got me emotionally, and it's more when you look at the grand scheme of this whole event and how terrible war is. So it's a movie that, man, you know what? I've given so many of these ratings out just in the past few weeks that I'm kind of hesitant to give it to this movie, but fuck it. Get off your ass and go see it right now. This is Christopher Nolan's best movie since The Dark Knight. And just like with The Dark Knight, and even Dark Knight Rises and Interstellar, if you're going to see this movie, you have to see it in IMAX and a true 8-story IMAX screen. Don't see this movie in an IMAX screen that's just a regular size screen. Just go out of your way to try to find a true 8-story IMAX screen, and that will enhance the experience even more. I'm lucky enough to live near Universal City Walk, and they have a true 8-story IMAX screen. That's the ultimate way to see this movie. Is it one of the greatest war movies ever made? I think we need a little more time for that, but right now, it's truly great. And that's my review for Dunkirk. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a comment down below and tell me what your thoughts are on the movie, if and when you've seen it. And as always, this is the real Mr. Robinson telling you there's only one.